This week, Ira Winkler from Mentem joins us on the show for our feature interview. In our security startup news this week, how I've learned to hire remote employees when your processes fail, why this CIO appointed an employee to change dumb company rules, no business is bulletproof, and how they reversed a $300,000 burn and hit profitability without laying off a single employee. We'll talk about the periodic table of cybersecurity startups and a little about Akamai. All that and more on this edition of Startup Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Startup Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by, do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Welcome, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. This is episode 33, and it's March 31st, 2017. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, sitting in a very cold climate, looking forward to going to Orlando. Not like the beach bum over there who's laughing, because like, I'm always in a warm climate.
Yes. Yeah, today I actually looked outside. I went, wow, it's kind of sunny. And barefoot, I walked outside, just stood there, soaked up the rays a little bit, and just kind of. I'm
picturing you in your bathrobe, picking up the morning paper.
Yeah.
Although it's funny, no one reads I don't know anyone that reads the paper anymore.
My son. It's really? Actually funny.
Reads the actual physical newspaper?
Yep. We're down to one subscription, but he asked me now to reinstate it. And on the days and I skim it, he's like, are you done with that? Can I take that now? And he reads the actual physical paper. And in fact, to be fair, he's reading Wall Street Journal stuff. Yeah. And he's diving into the business pages and coming back with really smart questions. So I figure, okay, I will keep subscribing. Go ahead. Read. It's fantastic.
Before we get into our interview, just a quick announcement. IT Pro TV's courses now include Sierra Update, Let's Encrypt, ITIL SOA, and ITIL PPO. Premium annual membership includes all video content, as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. You'd normally pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year, but we've got a special offer for our listeners. For a limited time, get 50% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. Go to itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS50. I hope I got that right. If I didn't, it's in the beginning of the show, and you can get the right URL and discount code. The discount code is SS50. And that saves you 50% off, which is a really good rate. And IT Pro is our party bus sponsor for InfoSec World. Ira, you're definitely invited, by the way. I said publicly, you were always on the list. I must have had an old email address for you. But we're going to get a bus and go visit IT Pro for a night, which is going to be a lot of fun. And they want to get to know the security community, so they are doing a good job of that because they provided drinks on the bus to go out there.
Yeah, they know us already.
They know us well. Yeah, imagine that. I'd like to welcome our guest, Ira Winkler from Mentem. Ira, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Ira, you were on in a Security Weekly episode like a long time ago, so it's nice to catch up with you. It's nice to know we'll be at the same event next week as well. I wanted to start by asking you. This is a bit of a different interview. We talk about like startups and stuff. Now, were you involved with a startup before Secure Mentem, or Secure Mentem was your first like foray into the whole startup and having your own company thing, right?
Well, I previously had a company, Internet Security Advisors Group, that I started back in, I guess, 1997, and I ended up selling that to HP right around the time the dot-com bomb hit. So this Secure Mentem is actually my second startup that I've been going for, and so that answers the question. So I'll wait till the next one.
So with Secure Mentem, how did that get started, and what was the driving factors behind starting that company, and what do you do?
Okay, so basically what Secure Mentem, actually let me talk about how the company came about, and then I could talk about, it'll tie right into what we do. So I was talking to a security awareness manager for a large retailer, and I was saying, so what do you do as the security awareness manager? Because I was doing random security awareness consulting at the time, and it was like, well, I put together newsletters, posters, run phishing campaigns, hold events, and so on. And I'm like, well, you were the security awareness manager at another company before that in the manufacturing sector. What'd you do there? Well, I did posters, newsletters, created a knowledge base, ran events, did phishing campaigns. I'm like, who helps you with that? And she was like, well, I go to this company maybe for phishing. I go to that. I look for different computer-based training vendors. I go, no, who actually helps with the process? Because most of the time there really isn't a knowledgeable security awareness person in place. And she went, nobody. And then I was like, that's a business model, because it's not just, security awareness isn't just about pushing out random materials in a haphazard way, which is what most people are doing, and like doing simulated phishing messages. Like every other security process, there's a process. It's not just randomly throwing things like spaghetti on the refrigerator and see what sticks. So came up with a process, a repeatable process on how to implement and maintain security awareness programs that are more cost-effective and also more cost-effective and just generally more effective than a company can do on their own. And likewise, we pretty much do anything that's related to the human aspects of security, whether it's phishing simulations, social engineering, USB drops, or doing metrics. For example, a lot of people don't know how to tell if their security awareness program is actually having an impact, because simulated phishing messages, even if it was a good way of looking at it, is just one piece of the puzzle. They don't know how to tell if they're getting their money's worth. So that's essentially what we do with our flagship service being the Security Awareness as a Service, where we implement, maintain, create, implement, and maintain security awareness programs. Pretty much we can start one up within 3 months and then have it up and running that quickly. And again, more effective and more cost effective than an organization can do on their own.
Now, Ira, to solve this problem, it's a service, not so much a product, right? Have you ever gotten to that crossroads where hey, can people just buy something from you, or is it they have to work with you hand in hand as a service?
Well, we call it Security Awareness as a Service because that's the latest buzzword. It started out Security Awareness Managed Service, and frankly, you have to look at things as what are the buzzwords, because that's what attracts investors. We've implemented a process that can be, or we created a process that can be implemented with technology, and we're actually in the process of building systems to automate that. So while currently it's there, the ideal goal is we're not necessarily going to have people involved in the delivery of the program because, again, we've implemented a process, not a service. We call it as a service because that's the buzzword, but we also provide products, whether it's posters, newsletters, what do you call those, monitor displays and things like that. But this is all meant to be delivered in an automated fashion, and once the system's up and running, it'll be a premium service to have our people directly involved, but people will be able to get a comprehensive program in place really quickly via automation, which is the end state of the company.
Mm-hmm. Michael, questions for Ira. I know security awareness is a a love-hate relationship that you have with security.
No. I mean, it's
in a good
I
way,
love the
though.
process and I love the approach. I mean, right? I look at how we translate stuff and change behaviors the same way. So I like the approach. How do you deal with all the people who think that awareness is training and training is actually development? Like, where do you draw those lines, and how do you help a client set reasonable expectations for what they can expect from a product or a service like this?
Well, you touched upon a critical thing, because when we started this, we have people who say, well, I want videos. And I'm like, if they think all awareness is videos, they're probably not going to be my customer. They're probably going to have a crappy awareness program. I mean, I don't want to say no offense, but yeah, you should be offended, because there's a difference between awareness and training, and most people don't get this. Training is providing people a fixed body of knowledge and maybe testing them on it. Providing people a fixed body of knowledge has proven itself to do absolutely nothing. For example, everybody knows, and I'll use this, everybody knows that to be healthy and fit, you should eat less and exercise more. If you don't know that, you're a complete fool at this point in time. However, how many people actually implement the information that they have? What awareness is about, so again, that's training. What awareness is about is changing behaviors. So for example, training might tell people, here's what a good password is. Should have 8 characters, numbers, letters, yada, yada, yada. Awareness is, does the person have a good password? And the way I say to test that is not give them a quiz that says, should a good password have 3 or less characters, 4 to 7, or 8 or more? The test is, let's run a password cracker and see how many people have strong passwords. That's the real metric that we recommend people have for something like password security. Likewise, a metric, most people are using phishing simulations as a metric, which is somewhat okay. But a better metric of phishing simulation or phishing awareness is the number of malware events on your network. Because if you think about what's the end result of phishing or web browsing awareness, the end result is usually downloading malware on the network if they're compromised. There's obviously giving up credentials or something, but again, the number of malware incidents is a good indicator of how many people are not security aware or how many people are security aware, and you look for trends. So that's part of integrating metrics into the programs like we try to do.
I love looking at behaviors. So when you go in and you start with somebody, do you have to do like an assessment or an audit? And then in that, and I know this is 2 questions, does that give you the ability to figure out where they need to start? Because one of the things that's always intrigued me is, here, I've got a PowerPoint. It's 150 slides. It covers everything I've done for the last 20 years. That's your awareness program. We both know that's not effective. I think most people, I hope, realize that that's not effective. But it also seems to me then, too, that by looking at behaviors, does that guide where you can help them focus?
Exactly, because what we essentially do is we start out with an assessment of the organization. Again, the assessment could be automated in the future, but what awareness programs are supposed to have, and most people don't get this, awareness programs are essentially composed of 3 parts the way we do it. We need to understand the culture, because culture tells us the communication tools that are going to work within that organization. We need to understand business drivers, because business drivers tell us the topics that we're going to have or focus on using those tools. And then we need to know what metrics are going to be the best representation or the most useful or easiest to collect for that customer. So we need to know those 3 pieces of information, and based upon that, we roll out awareness programs, not using just, here's this topic in month 1, here's that topic in month 2, but using marketing principles to simultaneously focus on several topics and then reinforce those topics over a longer period of time using multiple communication tools that are in conjunction with the organization's culture.
So, and you mentioned before too, and I like this a lot, talk about trends. So that means that you're able to go back and start looking at, okay, this particular topic we're really gaining traction with, or this is a particular modality or communication style that's making a difference. I mean, which then gives your client the ability to go back and say, hey, boss, that money I asked for that we spent? Yeah, we're getting results. Am I connecting those dots right?
Absolutely. There's one time, and this is one of the security awareness horror stories. We were interviewing a security awareness manager and asked, and this was a Fortune 50 type company, and we go, so what are you doing with your awareness program? And he says, well, I put out a newsletter, and I spend 60% of my time on a newsletter. I spend $75,000 a year on my newsletter. And I'm like, okay, how are you spending that money? It's like, well, I purchased the newsletter from the National Security Institute, which has a boilerplate newsletter, and I pick out the content relevant, and then I have it translated into 20 different languages. And that's where most of my expense goes into the translation. And I'm like, okay, so 60% of your time is spent in a given quarter creating a newsletter that you take from a template and then translate. I go, how many people are reading this newsletter, just out of curiosity? And he goes, I knew you'd ask that. So he goes, 517 people downloaded the last newsletter. I'm like, okay, how many people did you say were in your company again? He goes, 160,000. I'm like, okay, and then he sees this. He's like, well, we have a lot of factory floors. I see what you're thinking, but I'm pretty sure somebody prints it up and posts it on a bulletin board. I'm like, okay, keep thinking that. But the reality is, if you track things and you start seeing how many people open up a newsletter, how many people go to a knowledge base, because that's another thing we have as a unique service where we offer a default or a templated security portal where people can go to and get up-to-date information on personal concerns like how to tell if a message is a phishing message, how to protect your children on the internet, and so on. You put that there, you see the number of reads that go there. You look, for example, at the calls to the help desk that are security related, and that way you have better metrics as far as how successful your organization is. I think I answered your question, but if I didn't, let me know.
Ira, have you worked with places like a university, for example? I think it's probably the shining example of they want security awareness because they don't have control over their users or their users' computers. However, those users are on their network. So they're like an ISP, except the stakes are a little higher because you still have resources that they're accessing that are sensitive, and you have this interesting security problem. And I've worked in the university space. I saw a lot of different security awareness programs. So do you have advice for them? Or, don't give out your customers, obviously, but I don't know if you've worked with universities in the past.
Well, sadly, I haven't worked with universities. And the reason I say sadly is because the environment you describe is not just for universities. It's frankly scary because a lot of high-tech companies, especially in Silicon Valley, have a similar attitude. We worked with one organization, and this was, I can't tell you the name of it, but, you'd be kind of on the surprise side, where they didn't have mandates for their people to keep their laptops up to date. So if you were running, if an engineer was running Windows, they could not mandate you have to update to the latest service pack. So what we worked on doing was work on putting together contests and defining different groups of people, or breaking people down into departments, and then measuring the number of people who had the most up-to-date computers within their department, by percentage. And then we also did things like running fuzzing tools, and the fuzzing tools would tell who's writing the more secure code, as an example, as well. And it's not just secure when you do fuzzing, it's also the number of bugs in the code. So by implementing a fuzzing tool combined with implementing I guess you'd almost call it gamification, where you track the departments that have the highest level of conformance with patch systems, we were able to go ahead and move the needle, for lack of a better way of describing it. Now, universities as you're saying, have a different thing. I have, for example, I think universities are so public, but when I met with University of Texas at Austin, they were requiring that in order to get to their network, that you had to install this agent, and the agent verified whether or not you were running the latest up-to-date pieces of software before they would let the laptop connect. And if it didn't, it would tell you have to update it. Now, that's another way of enforcing it because, frankly, too many people think of security awareness as just a user problem. I still think there's a concept that, when I was doing security awareness, there's a concept that we brought in from safety programs, because safety, in other words, the number of accidents, and we need to eliminate that. Because really, when a user makes a mistake, it's technically the equivalent of somebody injuring themselves on the job. In the safety world, it was found out that 90% of accidents can be stopped by removing environmental causes. So, for example, painting lines on the floors of factories to say this is a walkway and that's a driveway, whatever you'd call that, where forklifts can go. That significantly cut down the number of accidents, because now people knew they had to walk within the yellow lines, and they weren't randomly hit by a forklift operator who also knew he had to stay within the lines and not, for example, veer out of the way of one person and veer into another person who he didn't know was there when he veered over. So they found that 90% of all accidents were prevented by taking away environmental causes. That leaves 10% that are the result of carelessness or willful ignorance, or just random accidents of good people somehow making a mistake. It's the same thing in the security awareness world for computers. So, for example, if people have up-to-date laptops, if you require that you need an administrative password to download software, you would eliminate all ransomware attacks. So if universities and other places can implement technology that reduce the potential for users harming themselves and the universities, that's another way of addressing user awareness, and that's something we obviously work with organizations on. Because yes, you want to have people who know what to do, but you also have to make sure that if they do the right things, they're going to be reasonably well protected, and you have to take away the potential for accidents.
So I just want to ask you a little bit about your company. So when you got started, did you take on funding, and how did you get it off the ground and grow and build it over the years?
Well, for the company, when I started Secure Mentem, it was just like, okay, we started with consulting income, because obviously the end goal was to create an automated system to deliver awareness at scale. We started out with a contract, and we wrote white papers initially based upon proprietary research that we did. We then went ahead and got a few consulting contracts. We then got some seed money from a company that owned lots of other companies, and we started to, that started getting the company going. And then that allowed us to implement the security awareness as a service, as a process. And then we've been growing through there. We've won the Maryland Cyber Shark Tank Award recently, which has given us some more funding. Thank you. Which has given us some more funding. And then, now we're in the process of continuing to take the funding, implement the back-end system. When we reach the next milestone, we'll be going out for some more funding.
Ira, you have a really awesome philosophy about user awareness training. In your own organization, how do you instill that philosophy on the people who join your company?
That's one of those things where luckily we're still at the size now where we have people who are aware and deliver awareness trainings as part of their job. So keeping up to date on what the awareness is frankly just doing their job, which involves reading articles, seeing what's gone in the newspapers, looking at the technology and everything else. It's one of those things where if we're not aware of a topic and we look at a company that needs it, we obviously have to learn it ourselves. So a lot of what this concern is on the job. As new people come in, we're still at the luxury, and this is something every startup has to go through, we're still at the luxury where we can hire A-list people. Once you get past like 20 people or so, you have to start scaling down your expectations of the quality of people you can get. But in the at least early on, given that this is our area of specialization, we have people who are already aware. And I would say that it would be the equivalent of when you're doing security assessment and you can hire like A-list people who are penetration testers who you've worked with before. You don't have to train them how to do their job in that case. Right. Once you get to a certain extent and you have to start hiring assistants to your A-list people and go down to B-list or ideally not C-list, then you have to start implementing a more formal training program. But so far, not at that level yet.
Fantastic. Michael, more questions for Ira?
I mean, I always have a lot of questions. It'll be I hope we get to connect up in Orlando and have some more conversation around this, because I'm really encouraged to hear a lot of the things that you're doing, because it sounds like it's the opposite of my rants, which is fantastic. So I think that's good. I think the question I would have then is, how often do you run into people who are like, oh yeah, no, I'm good, I got it, I put up a bunch of posters into the PowerPoint, the stuff we talked with, but like, so I'm going to switch now to looking at the mechanics of running a business. So you're doing something that's a little different than everybody else. It's a problem that seems to be pervasive. People have budget for awareness. I would argue almost never enough, because they don't understand it, so they don't budget for it properly. So how often are you running into that? Like, when you're from the business side, how often are you connecting with somebody who is looking for exactly what you're doing and they have the budget for it, versus you have to nurture them and that's where you're trying to focus your traction? Or tell us where your current challenges are. What are you trying to accomplish as a business?
Well, some of it, and a lot of the concerns I have are, will be handled with the automation. There's several aspects to what we do as far as customers go. The first aspect is there's a lot of people who you have to somewhat educate that awareness is not pushing out videos and doing phishing simulations. Those might be parts of it, but it's kind of like saying I have an antivirus product and I have a firewall, so therefore I have a security program. Again, in that analogy, having CBT and having phishing simulations is the same as having antivirus and firewalls and saying you have a security program. I would say about a third of the CISOs we run into understand the concern. Then for our issue, we have to get into their budget cycle and make sure that they understand this, because to a certain extent, and we don't recommend this, because we recommend that, yes, you might want to keep a phishing simulation service along with us. And sometimes we have to offer phishing simulation to get the work, because that's what they budget for, because we have to essentially take out, I don't want to say take out a concern, but many CISOs, for example, already know they budgeted and told people they need phishing simulation, and they budget for that because that's what their auditors told their companies they need. But then they have to go back in and say, okay, well, we're changing our methodology, and we have to potentially wait for another contract to expire. And then we can go in with that. There's a little bit of, frankly, most of our customers, when they hear what we do, they immediately get it, because they realize that CBT and phishing is not an awareness program, because they have those things and people still make mistakes. So they're looking for something more tailored, and those are going to be our customers. And I would say generally about a third.
Yeah, no, and that's pretty interesting. You said something. There's a new book I've been reading called Play Bigger, and I'm really enjoying it. And it said, if you want to go define yourself, you either have to solve a problem people didn't think was solvable, or you have to help them understand the problem the new way. And I think you're kind of like between the two. People have tried a bunch of stuff, as you said in the beginning, throwing spaghetti at the fridge, and it's not working. And if you go in and ask them, well, how are you measuring it? I don't know. Okay, well, and what should you do next? What are you focusing on? How is that working? And they don't know. So when you come along and you say, okay, hold on, it's a process. It's not one size fits all. Here's some stuff we can do. I can see where there's probably a good number of people looking at that going, yes, where you been, man? So that's good.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate that. And again, it's a little, some of it is slightly frustrating that we have to do some education, because it's intuitively obvious. I mean, it's great. I'm talking to you, and I know you're really big on security culture, so you get it. It's a little frustrating that, I still talk to some people who think, security awareness doesn't work. I go, no, security awareness, I have to politely tell them, and sometimes I just lose the politeness, but no, security awareness doesn't work with how you're implementing it. It doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't mean it's security awareness. In other words, it's not me. It's you, and you've got to understand that what you're doing is not true security awareness, which is a little bit of the problem. But a lot of companies are already suffering the pain of doing things wrong and then realizing there's a better way.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting point, right? Because there's a lot of confusion in the security industry alone. Like if you say security, it's confusing. If you say risk, it's confusing. If you say cyber, it's confusing. So now you take this concept of awareness, which is also confusing, and you add security in front of it. Now you've added confusion on top of confusion around confusion. And as you pointed out, somebody's like, well, I tried that, didn't work.
I'm so confused.
Hold on. How did you try that? What were you trying to do? And of course it doesn't work. And that's so so what I'm hearing from you then too is that there's a big need for you to try to do education. So was that turn into writing and coming to conferences and speaking, or do you have a more concerted effort to educate people on what you are actually able to help them do?
Well, so far, and this is bad on me, I have to admit, startup, but so far all my leads are inbound leads. They either see, because I write for CSO, I write for Dark Reading periodically, I write for Computer World, I speak probably at 30, 40 events a year, give or take. And I see a lot of people. My company's also covered by Gartner. We're in the Gartner Magic Quadrant document. So a lot of people come to us through that. And typically they will come to us, ideally, not when they are just looking for a CBT, but when they actually read something that triggers, because obviously what I'm telling you now and discussing with you, I write about frequently, and people say, yes, I have that exact problem. I've needed some better way to approach what I've been doing and how I've been doing it. I need to talk to you to assess my program and then come in and help me redesign it.
Ira, speaking at conferences, you'll be at InfoSec World next week, and your talk is on which topic?
Next week, I'm going to be talking at InfoSecurity World on the phishing kill chain, where it's a lot along the topic some of the material I covered with you, that it's not just an environment, it's not just a user clicking on a phishing message that causes the phishing message to be successful. It's the environment. First, the message has to get to the user. Then that means technology has failed by allowing that message to get to the user. Then the user has to be able to click on it, which is another technology failing. Then the system should say, do you really want to do this stupid thing, which a lot of there's software available to ask the user. Then if the user says yes, then the system should say, you're not allowed to do it. You don't have permission to do this, or you don't have permission to go to this phishing website, which is obviously a phishing website. So we're going to stop you from going there. And then the system and network should should mitigate it. So I'm going to talk about the step-by-step process of where users fit in to prevent phishing and where technology fits in to prevent phishing, to provide a holistic way to stop phishing much more effectively. Because if a user clicks on a phishing message and it takes down your network royally sucks. It's not the user. Again, if you think it's a user failure that ransomware is on your network, your security program's a failure.
Ira Winkler, thank you very much for appearing on Startup Security Weekly, and we look forward to hanging out with you next week.
Looking forward to it as well. Thanks again for having me.
Stay tuned. Startup news coming up next.